Hello, welcome back to the series Back to Basics, and today we're going into the first system. How do your hips and legs work in a golf swing? As I said before, this time of year you want to start to be working on basic technical abilities in your swing. Whenever you're making a golf swing, you are using abilities that you possess, or you're creating abilities that you don't yet possess. And this could be one of either for you. Sometimes you'll actually find that you were never really using your legs and hips correctly, never really getting enough hip rotation, and sometimes it's more about reminding the body to do it correctly and not falling into old habits. And at this time of year, when we're maybe not on the golf course as much, we've got more time to practice, and therefore there's not as many contradictions happening on the golf course. The feeling of wanting to do the old movement, knowing you want to do the new one, this is a perfect time to start practicing. I want to talk a little bit about kind of how the hips are going to rotate and how the legs are going to help the hips to rotate. And it all basically comes down to using the ground and your legs to turn your hips. Rather than trying to keep your legs still and rotate your hips, what we're trying to do is to push them around using our legs. So it's almost like taking the side of the hips and the lead leg pushing one back and the trail leg pushing the other forward, and we're talking about the follow through towards the target. In the backswing, to a certain extent, the upper body rotation is going to help you to turn your hips, but it's very important the way that your legs are working in order to keep you centered over the golf ball, in order to be able to keep pressure on both feet so that you can accelerate correctly through the golf ball. So let's just get into a little bit of detail, and really you don't need a golf club even for this exercise. I've shown you it before. What's actually happening is as you rotate away from the ball, what you're trying to do is stay centered. And you're going to do this by stopping yourself wandering. You see, if I wander over to the side, usually what's happening is I'm keeping that trail leg bent, and therefore I don't have enough resistance. If on the other hand I allow this trail leg to straighten, it will actually push my hip up, my trail hip up, and as I at the same time bend my lead leg, then the hip is actually going to tilt. And this will actually give me the feeling as though rather than moving off the ball, I'm actually moving more over the ball. It's helping me to stay over the ball, and this tilt is also helping your upper body to stay over the ball as well. So it's an extremely important part of a swing. So I don't want you to have the feeling that your legs and hips aren't doing anything. On the contrary, you're allowing the trail leg to straighten and the lead leg to bend. Now, this will give a lot of you the feeling that you're kind of tilting towards the target. This, to a certain extent, is happening. You are actually going to be tilting your pelvis towards the target, but don't worry about it. This is perfectly okay. And when you start rotating your chest properly, that will actually even everything out and keep your head and your center over the golf ball despite this movement. What will also a bit strange for a lot of you is the feeling that although at the beginning of the backswing there is a kind of a weight transfer, a pressure transfer into the trail foot, as you get further back in the swing, you center the weight and even move a little bit into your front foot. And this is intentional. In order for your legs to work properly in the downswing, they have to be able to press against the ground. And they can't do that if you're just standing on one leg. So although it's quite okay for your lead heel to come off the ground in the backswing, you should still have a feeling of almost having a bit more pressure on the balls of your front feet than you do on the instep of your trail foot at the top of your backswing. And this is really, again, something I want you to try and practice all through the winter. This feeling of this tilting pelvis, the straightening of the leg, the bending of the lead leg, and the change of the weight as it kind of wanders back and back to the middle, right and back to the middle for a right-hander, or left and back to the middle for a left-hander. This is a feeling that you want to generate, because when you get that kind of a feeling, it's something that it's very easy to actually feel when you're swinging a golf club. You'll actually be able to compare the feeling you have in the drill against the feeling that you have when you're swinging the club. As you change directions, there's a number of things going on. First of all, the trail knee has got to bend. And as you do that, you will actually find that your trail foot is actually kind of pressing into the ground and away from the target. So in this direction when you're wanting to go there. And this is actually going to make the trail knee kind of come down and then turn towards the target. At the same time, your lead foot is pressing backwards without, to start off, the lead knee straightening. It's allowing almost the trail knee to come down to its height, and the lead foot is pressing, despite that, the lead hip backwards. Now, what you're actually seeing on the camera at the moment is obviously a bit of an exaggeration to the movement you're going to be making when you have a dynamic swing and a club in your hand. When you're moving your upper body and your club here, so you are going to actually be moving into your left side perfectly automatically. You were actually in your left side at the top of the swing. When you're making this drill, it might well feel as you do this that your weight moves back onto your trail foot, and that's quite okay. You'll never actually be able to simulate an actual golf swing when you're not making one. So all you're doing is basically training the muscles and the joints, training the orders which are coming from your brain to your muscles. In what kind of sequence should you be doing these, and how do you actually do it? So there is a feeling of the trail foot kind of pushing back away from the target, and the lead foot almost pushing at a diagonal out along its extension. You can see that I don't have my lead foot actually pointing at the camera. I have my lead foot splayed out somewhat, and that helps my lead leg to kind of push my lead hip back and out of the way. As I have the feeling of basically getting rotation in my hips, so I'm feeling I'm turning 45 degrees to the target, I'll then go into extension. Again, we're talking about degrees which will vary between players. There will be a feeling of you being rotated as far as you can. Whenever that is, you go into extension with the legs. And going into extension into the legs then is actually going to bring the hips up. So your hips are actually going to raise through impact. Now, doing this exercise is basically a question of repetition. I go back, trail leg straightens, lead leg bends. I come down and twist towards a target, and then go up. You can see there the trail heel is coming totally off the ground. The lead foot, I'm usually kind of going back and into the heel and onto the side of my foot. That's perfectly okay. You don't have to keep the foot totally on the ground at this stage. A lot of you I know out there are going to start worrying that if your hips are going up and down, then your entire body is going up and down. This is one of the things we'll talk about later in the series, is getting a bit of kind of separation in your feeling of what your hips are doing and what your shoulders are doing. So your hips could be actually going up and down, and your shoulders are still staying in the same level. And this is because, as I said in the past, your spine is working a little bit like a shock absorber, and it's bending and allowing your lower body to bump up and down a little bit like the shock absorbers in your car. You don't necessarily feel all the bumps on the ride because of them. You are sat in a nice quiet cabin and enjoying the ride. And it's similar for your golf swing. If you can get yourself into a position, if you watch my head when I'm doing this drill, I can get my head staying relatively still, although I'm actually bumping up and down with my hips. There are three main forces you're using through your legs in a golf swing. First one is obviously you have rotational forces. By using shear forces on the ground, your feet pressing sideways across the ground, they're accelerating the rotation of your hips, and therefore they're accelerating indirectly your golf swing. You are also having lateral movement, horizontal to the ground. There is a movement right and left, but it's staying confined between your feet. So if you were to pull up kind of two lines here, you are moving in between these two lines, kind of coming up from the sides of your feet, but you don't want to get too much sliding going on during the swing. At the same time, however, you're using what we call vertical forces. And these vertical forces are extremely important in the acceleration of the golf club down. If you can get those legs extending through impact, you are actually going to create an opposite force in the club, and the club is simply going to come down quicker. And that's going to give you more power. If you look at all of the long drivers, they're actually kind of going up, down and up with their entire bodies in order to generate these powers. We're going to do it a little bit more gently, try and keep the upper body pretty quiet, but the lower body is definitely going to be pushing into the ground and pumping into the ground with the legs in order to generate this kind of rotational force, vertical force and horizontal force all at the same time. The beauty of it is, if you can just get your body used to doing this sequence of movements with your legs and hips, you're halfway there. And if you do it the whole of the winter, by the new year, you shouldn't be thinking about it anymore. It should be intuitive and just a simple part of your golf swing that others will look on with wonder. Hope this is going to help you. Hope you're going to do it. Try it out. I know it works. My customers are all very happy and they are moving their hips in a wonderful way, which is accelerating their golf swings, I promise. Hit the like button if you did like it. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Big thanks and shout to all of my patrons. If you'd like to become a patron, I'll leave a link below.